welcome to session 3 of the Get Your Garden On here. And yeah, let's talk about soil blocks and composting. Let's see, present screen. Da, 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 da. Dun, 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 dun. Boating? No, that's my safe boater course that I was working on. All right, let's see. Hold it. I'm missing stuff. Where is it? Oh, I minimized it. Like a moron. There we go. Here's my presentation. All right, remember, you can move my face around on your screen as you see fit. So yes, welcome aboard. Whoa. So like I said, we're going to flip-flop these, talking about soil blocks first. Sharing is paused. Why is sharing paused? Let's try that again. Okay. Oh, it says I'm screen sharing now, so good. So as I was getting ready for this class, I was scrolling through my Instagram from like back in like 2013, 14 or something like that when we were doing the market gardening. I just wanted to like share this. This coming across this picture just made me so happy. This is like what my summers are like all the time. But way back then, I used to take time to like really like take these fun pictures of all the different varieties of things that I was growing, because they were ending up in my customers' like CSA boxes. And so I wanted them to know what was in their box. So not only was I harvesting these, but I was putting these in their boxes, and so that they would know what they were getting. They were getting like, 5, 6 different types of peppers and eggplant and stuff like that. It was such a fun thing. Just the diversity of what's out there. And a lot of those are like heirloom seeds. So starting off with fish fertilizers and seaweed fertilizers. So I didn't have a jar, because I think the last time I used my jar was at a friend's house, and I think I just like left it there. But this is the brand that I use of a fish or seaweed fertilizer. I use that King Neptune's Neptune's brand. Now they have different prices, different sizes. Here's the thing: the home gardener is like never going to need the gallon size. Oh my God, the 5-gallon size. No, you're going to be fine. So because with this, what you're doing is, remember, you're going to use only like a tablespoon or 2 for your whole garden every time you apply this. So it's potent stuff. It's pretty potent stuff. So, and you're going to be diluting it down with water. It'd be like a gallon of water and a tablespoon of this fertilizer. And it smells like fish, sure, smells like seaweed, but it's not harsh when it comes down to it. The numberings on this, it's a decent numbering for your nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus, NPK. Potassium's at the end. Nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. Nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, your NPK. Anyway, I teach, like I said, in the summer, I'm going to do a whole like organic fertility class where we really get into all this stuff. But if you want something off the shelf that you can buy and use as an organic spray, that would be one. Also, I've got this like behind me as well. You want something that dissolves in water that you could spray on the plants. Not like this. Kelp meal is something completely different. This is something that I use when I brew like an organic, like a tea mixture that I'm spraying on the plants, like a compost tea. Again, that'd be like something that I teach you like in like the summer type of class that we do. So anyway, so kelp meal itself is just like ground up kelp, seaweed. And so it's not water soluble. It's not something that you take like a tablespoon or 2 and you put it in to a jar and shake it up and it completely dissolves. Just like putting sugar in water, shake it up, it's going to completely dissolve. Anyway, what you get from seaweed fertilizers especially is that you get trace minerals. Here we go. It's like, why would you even think about doing this? What, isn't compost good enough? Yeah, in general it is. But this is one of those things where it's going to add fertility, your basic nutrients. With the fish fertilizer, it's going to add all 3, nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. But with a seaweed one, even though might be missing some, it's missing the phosphorus, but it's got the NPK, it's got the potassium and the nitrogen. It's gonna have other micronutrients. It's gonna have some of those trace elements in it. just because of what it is. And that's why I'll add kelp meal to a potting mix, or I will spray on the leaves, those liquid fertilizers. So again, what you were seeing, that King Neptune's thing, that's a liquid fertilizer. I would be using a pump sprayer like this, filling it up with a gallon or two of water, and then a tablespoon or two of that fertilizer, and spraying it just on the leaves of the plants. You're spraying it on the leaves of the plants, doing a foliar spray in the daytime, because it actually absorbs it while it's photosynthesizing. So that's what you're trying to do, is to target your fertilization if you're using something like that, rather than using a general fertilizer like compost, which is fine, or a general fertilizer that I'll show you some other ones. So, okay, soil blocks. All right, I think that's where we're going. Let's see. Keeps going here because I did every time I don't exit this, it goes to a different screen. Okay. Oh yeah. In the summer class, this is like what what it looks like to make an aerobic compost tea. I came across this post. I was like, oh, this is the type of thing that I teach you how to do in like the advanced organic fertility class, is to set up like a pump with this, and it's pumping air and making this awesome organic tea. Anyway, we move beyond. I found those, so I was like really pumped to show them to you. Okay. So soil blocks. These are the blocking tools. The same three tools that are in the pictures are the same three tools that are right behind me, which we can kind of pull out later and see. And what I want you to see is that just like the plastic cells that we would be doing seedlings in, they're going to come in different sizes. This one right here, these are about, I think they're like 1.25 inches across or so, because I like to like really pump things out when the seedlings are just the right size. I like to get them out in the garden. I don't like to waste a lot of potting soil doing this. I like to go straight from soil block, seed into soil block, and when the soil block's ready, get it right in the garden. However, there are some bigger blocks, which if you look at this, it makes an impression in the block to accept a little transplant. So what you could do, I'll show you pictures and stuff like that, is that you could have a tray of these mini ones and start your seedlings. Look at this, there's 20 little spots for 20 little seedlings. And let's say you have poor germination with your eggplants or your peppers. Well, the thing is that if you had that on a whole tray, you'd be throwing half the tray out. But if you do it on a small scale, you can transplant the 10 that came out into a bigger cell, a week or so, probably 2 weeks after these had gotten going, you transplant them up, potting them up into a new soil block. So what we're going to see here is like, I'm not even getting really into like the why would you do soil blocks or something like that. I think you kind of get the why. It's that you're going to have some control over things, and you're not going to be using plastic. The only plastic that you might be using is like the trays that you put them on. Okay. And I still use these trays to hold the soil blocks. Just rows and rows and rows of soil blocks. So the tools, now these are stand-up versions of the tools. Now you're not likely to necessarily buy all of these, right? You're looking right now at $600 worth of tools right there, because each one of those is at least $200 a piece. Now I invested in those when I started like the farm. Now on every year, which one do I use? I use this one. This one that makes 20 of these little blocks, 5 by 4, I use this one because that one is actually the same as this bottom one right here. It's just I can like really pump out the soil blocks in a stand-up position. This, you would be working on like a picnic table or something like that, and pressing the blocks out on a picnic table. It's no big deal. Like the at-home gardener, making a few trays, these tools are about like $20, $25, $35 a piece. And really all you need is one. It's only if you like get addicted to this that you could like invest in other ones. So if you're looking to get one of these, I would get one of these, either this one or that one. Now, don't worry about the plugs, because they actually all come standard with like a little small dowel plug like this. Installing plugs this size, I could install them into any of these to accept this. That's just a little upgrade anyway. It's like I don't know, it's probably like 10, 15 bucks upgrade. But anyway, these stand-up ones, what I found is that like, especially getting a little older and all, I'm doing all the work while standing up, and pressing them out and just dropping them into pressing them into trays and working on them. This is what they look like from underneath. You can see, so all of these have the same footprint. That may not look like it, but they have the same length and width for these. But this one, I'm going to be pumping out 20 little seedlings. This one, I'm going to be pumping out, let's see, that's 12. And then this one I would use for very large plants, like seedlings that I want to put in here that I know are going to grow very fast and probably have a big root system fast. So that would be like cucumbers and pumpkins and melons and stuff like that. That whole family of things, summer squash, I'd be planting in either this or that, just because if I'm not going to plant them directly in the garden and I do want to start them, I want to have enough soil in here so that they have room to grow in case I can't plant them this weekend and I got to wait another weekend. Typically they'll be in here for about 3 weeks. That's it. The seedlings will be in the soil blocks for about 3 weeks if they're squash, cucumbers, tomatoes, and stuff like that. The other ones that are slower to grow, all of the kales and lettuces and your tomatoes, your peppers, all of those things that are a little slower to grow, I put them in smaller blocks because they don't fill up those blocks. They're not as vigorous of growers. And I've got time, and they will probably sit in those blocks for at least a month, if not 6 weeks. Anyway, so I'm just showing you all the different types of tools. Now, this tool on its own is like 150 bucks or so. And out of all the tools, this is the one that I regret ever paying for. It might be $100 now, but this is the Mega Block tool. Now, it's a neat idea, but I found that to make the blocks, it was a pain in the butt to make huge. Look at how big it is compared to my hand. It makes a 4-inch by 4-inch block. It is so much easier to just get a 4-inch by 4-inch pot, fill it with soil, and reuse those pots year from year from year, than to try and press out these gigantic blocks. Well, here's my thing: is that if you're going to really geek out with this, don't even bother getting this. If anything, if you really feel like you're going to be in this for the long haul, one of those stand-up ones is great. And one of these is going to be great. Again, maybe one of this or this. If the stand-up one, I'm telling you, my favorite is this one that pumps out 20 blocks at a time. It's nice. All right. So anyway, the nice thing about this too is that like you're in control of your mix, your potting mix. So you can, so I learned everything that I learned from experience and initially from this book, Elliot Coldman's The New Organic Grower. There's actually a new edition that just came out. I think it's like a 30th anniversary or whatever. And in that book, he's got a whole chapter 14, all on soil blocks. Just putting it there because maybe you might have been planning on buying a book anyway. And this book on its own is just awesome for just organic gardening and everything. It is geared towards a market gardener, somebody who's going to grow on a bigger scale, but all the stuff that you learn in it can be applied in smaller background gardens. Anyway, yeah, there's the new, I just found this today. I was like, oh my God, there's a new edition. I kind of want to get it. So anyway, I buy these, you can buy the blockers on Amazon, but Johnny's, they sell all of them, and I will tell you, it will be cheaper to buy it through Johnny's than through Amazon, because Johnny's sells them on Amazon, but then you got the Amazon markup in order to pay for them. So go straight to Johnny's if you're interested on it. Don't do the Amazon or eBay type of thing. So making the mix. Yep. Making the mix. That's with this. So this is a big bale. This is a huge bale of mix. I will tend to get just one of these for a season, and I use it for all sorts of things that I'm potting. It's an all-purpose mix. I just go down to my local shop, Mackey's, my local garden store. You won't find this in like the big box stores like your Home Depot or Lowe's. They're going to carry the potting mixes and stuff that are branded by Miracle Grow and stuff that have petrochemical fertilizers, in there. And if you want to go that route, you can. I like to add compost for fertility and some of the other fertilizers that we're going to talk about. I I would suggest, if you have a local garden center that's not one of the big box stores, just say, hey, do you have anything like the Lambert's like all-purpose mix, like a potting soil? You know, what you do hear me saying is I'm saying like a potting soil. I'm not saying they're calling it a growing media. I'm not calling it a seed starting mix, because I kind of want bulk. This whole bale right here costs $35. And it's one giant, it's like a wheelbarrow full, like not just a small wheelbarrow, like a two-wheeled wheelbarrow full of potting mix. This is a great buy. And this is the same bulk material that the greenhouse growers are using. So if you have anybody who's producing their own transplants and then selling them at a local garden center, they are going to have this on hand, and they'll be willing to sell you a bale or two. Now, I also, sometimes I don't have compost of my own that's ready. And so sometimes I'll also buy a bag of compost. Oh, that picture didn't show up. But anyway, sometimes I'll buy a little bag of compost. And I'll tell you what, these are the tools that I need for making soil blocks. I need a big pan, and I put my foot here intentionally so you can see how big the pan is. It's really like, it's let's see, 1, 2, it's almost 3 feet by 4 feet, almost. It's not quite like that. It might be 2.5 by 3 or 3.5 or so, but it's a big mixing pan. Where did I get this? These are the same mixing pans that you can find in a big box store where you'd be mixing concrete and those types of mixes, those bagged concrete mixes and stuff like that. So you can find it in that area. I found this one at my local Tractor Supply, I think over by like where the horses and chicken stuff is. It's just a big mixing pan. And so, and it's got like curved sides and everything. So it's nice. It keeps the work on the ground. You can pick this up and put it on a like a picnic table and work on it there at a higher level. This is me using my stand-up one. If I was using some of the smaller handheld ones like I have behind me, I'd be putting it on a picnic table. And a hoe. You know, I've got that, a hoe. I think the only other thing that I don't have would be a hose. But just a regular garden hose, no special nozzle or anything, just for wetting down the growing media. Altogether, the mix, the ratio of what do I put in here when we're making soil block mix? When we're making soil block mixes, I want to mix about at least like 4 parts of. Now, I'm not saying 4 bags. I'm saying 4 parts. So maybe I look at this and I fill it up and I go, okay. I typically start off with how much compost am I going to add? There's that picture of compost. These smaller bags, this might cost $12, and it's a fraction of the size of this bag. It's, you know, compost is going to be more expensive. I will typically buy compost when I'm making soil blocks, because the quality of this compost is going to be better than the quality of the compost that I make in my garden. This is already going to be sifted, and big material and stuff like that, it's going to be like sifted out. It's not going to get clogged up in my soil blocker. So what I'm saying is, like, when I'm making soil blocks, I have this stuff, all of these things are in my greenhouse year after year. And so what I'll do is maybe put half a bag of this into the pan, and then I'll use that as my one part, that half a bag, and then estimate just by eye about 4 more parts of I'll open up one of the bags and of this potting mix and mix it in. And so I do a dry mix first, mixing the compost in with this dry mix. To kind of like when you're baking, I mix all of the dry ingredients first. One of the other dry ingredients that I'm also mixing in is a general fertilizer. This is there's a whole slide that has like my recipe of like what I use, but I have bags of blood meal, which if you can totally substitute out and use other things besides blood meal. I've always used it. You can look into it if you're like not ethically okay with what it is. It's basically from the butchering industry. All these animals get killed, and you know, in order to fill the grocery shelves and the supermarkets and the restaurants with meats that people eat, and they save the blood and dry it out, and it's used as a fertilizer. Okay. That's basically what blood meal is. And if you ever see like feather meal on something, it's basically ground up feathers from the poultry industry. And it's very high in nitrogen. It's very high in nutrients. And why not have that, like that resource be used? Um, I'm not gonna like get on a soapbox or anything, but if it's not used by somebody, the animals are going to be killed, and like it's just going to go somewhere else. It's a byproduct of the industry. In my opinion, I'm not really supporting the industry. I'm supporting the use of that afterwards. If you want to have a bigger impact on meat eating, it's like, well, get you and your friends and your family to not eat meat. That's the bigger impact. But anyway, you can find other sources. So here is where I have my NPK, my nitrogen, my phosphorus, rock phosphorus, and my potassium. Green sand has a lot of those trace elements in it. It's literally a sand deposit in the earth that has potassium in it, but it also has trace elements in it. And it's green because of like those trace elements, like copper that's in it. And so, yeah. So anyway, I mix a small amount of this. It really is like a couple tablespoons of each into a big thing like this. And what that does is, remember that this doesn't have a lot of fertility. The compost does, but we're watering down the compost with all of this potting mix. The compost's purpose in here is not for fertility. It is mostly to make it like gummy. It's because this light, fluffy stuff doesn't stick at all. The compost adds a gumminess. And that's why I kind of don't want to put in too much potting soil, or else I'll lose that structure that holds the soil block together. So anyway, if I'm going to have things in here, I will add a little bit of fertility to them before they ever get into the garden. And that's where I'm adding a few tablespoons of each of these. And these bags really stretch and they go a long way. Okay, so I mix all my dry ingredients in. These dry ingredients get mixed in first, the compost and the potting mix. Then once I figure that that's fully mixed, I then mix in the fertilizers, just little bits. And then I water the whole thing down really well. And actually, this is kind of like what it looks like. These trays were prepped for indoor use, so that's why they had wax paper on the bottom. So that's just like a trick or something. But if I'm putting them outside or whatever, I wouldn't do wax paper. But yeah, I've got my trays ready. I've got my soil blockers ready. And I've got my potting mix all mixed up and moist and ready to go. And then you're just pressing these out. Like I said, this is like the general like seed starting mix that it's right here, and it's also in the handouts. The soil blocks themselves, when they get pressed out and they have things growing in them, these are Swiss chard seedlings that are growing. And look at that, like an earthworm moved in, the composting worm wasn't in the soil block. It moved into it as it was growing in the tray in my greenhouse. That's like how fertile this was, is that it invited in life. It wasn't sterile. The compost that was in there made it an inviting thing. This is another picture of a tomato plant growing in one. And so you can see like the roots grow right to the edge. The roots are not wound around in circles as they hit the edge of a plastic pot or a plastic cell. The roots are just right at the edge, so that when you plant this in the soil, the roots they're ready to grow. They are not bound up at all. This one, you can see tiny little rootlets. This one was just ready to plant. And so the roots had just hit the edge of the soil block. And then again, so like this is definitely, it's certainly like a healthy soil block. This is one of those 4-inch by 4-inch soil blocks, the gigantic ones that I no longer like make anymore. But this is from a time when I used to actually sell those as heirloom seedlings ready to go. By the way, these pictures are here from another class where my message is, don't buy these. These greenhouses are not greenhouses that you want to buy. This will end up in a windstorm in your neighbor's yard, and then you'll have to pay them damages because it hit their car or something. Don't get these. You can't anchor them, and they won't survive more than a season. But simple protections, like those cold frames that you could build and stuff like that, those are good. But why do I have all of these pictures here? Where are we? It's for this. For these soil block pictures. This is me and my daughter. That was actually my daughter as well. Oh, so young, in one of the high tunnels. But yeah, soil blocks, this is what it looks like when we're pressing them out. And I've got trays crisscross stacked. You can see some of the bigger cells and some of the smaller blocks that I was using. I gave her some of the smaller blocks for smaller seeds. And you can see I'm working on zucchini and squash and cucumbers. Like I said, bigger seeds, putting them in bigger blocks. And smaller flower seeds and herb seeds. She was so happy to like plant little sunflower seeds and stuff in these little cells. And so again, look at this. This is what my growing season looks like every year. In my greenhouse, I've just got tray after tray after tray of these soil blocks. I do this all in one day, making the blocks and then planting them all in one day. And then I've got the greenhouse to keep everything warm. And so this is it's a small greenhouse in the whole scheme of things. In the area that I'm using is only about like 12 feet by 6 feet. When I look at these posts are 4 feet apart. So it's about 12 feet by 6 feet. So just looking at this, that's a small amount of floor space, but it's enough to do my whole entire like garden with herbs and with lettuces and stuff like that. This is what it looks like a little later. This is what it looks like a little later with them shoved over and some other plants in here. And you can just see I've got flowers, I've got herbs, it's awesome. And then I also store extra beehives and stuff like that in my greenhouse. But yeah, so like I am not using heat mats anymore. I'm not using grow lights anymore. I've moved in the whole scheme of growing things at home. I've moved away from using things like that. Where's my face? There's my face. I lost my face. Sorry, guys. Even though I teach you how you can set up indoor grow systems, once I built a greenhouse, I no longer really needed the indoor grow system because I also wasn't like really trying to like push the boundaries of like the growing season as well. My greenhouse is warm enough now, days and nights, where I can start seedlings out there if I really wanted to, early April. I don't have to organize and get stuff going in my basement. However, not everybody has a greenhouse, but if you have the opportunity to like build a quality one, using 6mm greenhouse plastic, it's a good opportunity. So let's see, any questions? Okay, I don't see any questions. I'm gonna chug along. We're gonna get to easy composting. Again, like we're not gonna make it like it's not complex, but we're not going to dive crazy deep into composting. We're going to get into the basics, some simple do's and don'ts, and some simple setups and some setups that you shouldn't use, some like gimmicky types of things where it's like don't bother with them. Okay, so I'll go back to the presentation. Let's see. Oh yeah, pictures of soil blocks galore. Okay, so jumping into this. So composting, as we jump into that, my kids actually love jumping into mature compost. My daughter, when we got the straw the other week, she's like, "Are you going to get the pile of compost too?" I was like, "No, I'm not buying the compost." She's like, "Oh, I want to jump in it." I love the idea of my kids playing in compost. Okay, anyway, I had showed you this last week. I was happy how I had set up a little bin system. Now here's how I'm going to be using it this year, is that in this side, I'm just going to be like bulk gathering dry materials, these brown materials, old dead plants that have dried up that I will then use later in a composting system. Okay, so now I'm not going to be gathering anything here. What's going to happen is once this bin is roughly full, so I'm looking for a critical mass of dry materials, straw, dead plants and stuff like that, and things, stalks of different plants. Now, not crazy woody materials. I'm not putting like sticks in here. The hardest thing that might be in here might be a sunflower stem or a corn stalk. But I'm not going to put in anything from trees or from shrubs, just because those are really woody and those require a completely different composting system. Okay, so I'm talking about things that are brown and dry, and they're kind of soft when they're brown and dry, or brittle at least. They'll break in my own hands. Now, what'll happen is I'll be taking this whole thing. Once this is kind of filled up, I know that I have enough in here to then start layering it and creating a real compost. I'm a real compost pile. All right, so I'll start layering it with very dense and active green materials. Now, not necessarily really green materials, but things maybe like my chicken manure or my rabbit manure or my kitchen scraps, and layering it with that. So if I just started a pile of kitchen scraps right here, what's going to happen is I'm going to be inviting in all the raccoons and the crows and the possums and everything to just eat all those kitchen scraps and poop here and stuff like that, rather than me actually composting them. So what I'm going to talk about right now is a simple method of gathering materials and then processing them all at once. Okay. So now ideally what would happen is I would gather I would have a bulk amount of this material ready to go. And actually I do. This bin is already full because I have extra straw from when I covered my garden where I'm going to start the composting process already. And so that means that I don't have to like throw out kitchen scraps. I can start to use those kitchen scraps anyway. My favorite tools for this are a sharp spade and a pitchfork for digging through things and fluffing up through layers and stuff like that, and for adding and moving things around. So as I always talk about my favorite tools, these are the tools that are going to get used the most in making compost, for either turning things over or for slicing through a pile and chopping it up and then adding it, rotating it. I think I showed you pictures of this last time, how I had been bulk gathering my rabbit manure, which is those like little, was it newsprint pellets and rabbit manure. Now this, I chose not to compost because I know it's a manure that I could just put in my garden. So I did. I just put it in my garden. However, banking that material here, I could have also chosen to use that in combination with the pile of browns that I have. However, I know I've got a lot of chicken manure and I'm going to have kitchen scraps all this spring that I can start to compost. Okay. And so this kind of becomes like a little daily thing, once a day, at the end of the day, kind of bringing out the kitchen scraps. However, what I'll say is that bin next to the house is a handy bin to have. Oh, do I not have the other pictures? Let's see here. Let's see if something. Oh, this one. I never presented this one. There we go. There we go. We'll get there. Yes. Okay. So here's a don't even bother buying one of these or other tumbling devices. This one is meant to like roll on the ground. Here's the thing is that in order to make compost, you need a large volume of material. And that volume of material needs to actually be moist, which means it's going to be incredibly heavy. I bought this as an experiment. I bought it online off Craigslist. I paid 25 bucks from it. Somebody else probably paid 150 bucks for it or so. And I brought it to my school garden. And once we got it loaded up, none of the kids or I could even move it around. Now, we didn't even load it up all the way. We only loaded it halfway full, which is what you're supposed to do. It just was a mess. So I still have this as a warning of like, don't bother getting that. I do like, next to my recycling, my garbage can, I like having my compost bin here to like gather materials. Now, am I doing my actual composting in this? No. I'm using this as a place to bank materials. The top locks and it keeps rodents out. And so what I start to do right now is I'm starting to use this. Remember, this was used for my rabbit manure. I'm starting to put my rabbit manure in here with my kitchen scraps and then also some straw every now and then. Now, what I'm really doing is like banking these materials to then later on compost. But I hope what you heard there is when I put in kitchen scraps, I'm putting in some browns, some straws. Okay, so like I have a lot of straw, you know, because of the garden and everything. So it could be grass clippings, could be dried leaves and stuff like that. You just have to be careful with those because leaves and grass clippings can really mat down and kill off the air circulation in there and stop water from penetrating through the different layers. Anyway, I do like a bin like this to kind of gather materials until it's maybe like halfway full and then bring it in a wheelbarrow to the garden to process. This is a few years ago. Here's a tumbler that I do recommend. this gigantic tumbler that's on a stand, and because it has a gear system, I got this from a friend of mine, and this resides, I no longer have this at my house. I tested it out at my house and I was like, this is great. We brought it to my school garden, and the kids once a day crank this around. Again, you fill it about a third of the way up, never past that, so that as you turn it all the way around, the layers get flip-flopped. Now, this would be the only time you might, now again, what you can see is, what have I got here? I've got some like, what is it? I've got straw and stuff like that I'm adding in there, and some chicken manure and stuff like that I was adding in there. In a system like this, it might be the only time where you actually add something like this. Now, I never use this, but for somebody who's looking to like accelerate this is like an off the shelf container of bacteria, bacteria and fungi that are like going to help accelerate the rotting process. Here's the thing though, if you've got a tumbler like this, it's going to go fast. However, if you wanted your compost in maybe like 3 weeks instead of 4 weeks, this would accelerate it faster. It's gonna kick it up. You use like a tablespoon of this just to inoculate all the materials that are in here. But here's the thing, is that all these things that are going to be rotting, they have bacteria and fungi on them already. So I'm not saying buy anything. So again, let's see. Yeah. So I'm going to end up going to the handout right now. Let's see. So the handout has some stuff. So I haven't made any drawings or illustrations. I'm sorry, I didn't paint for you this week. But here's the thing, is that there are some simple things to remember for composting. You should choose a system. You see that I'm using a pile system, or some bins, and I have used the tumbler before. Okay. I am using something on the side to kind of keep it from the pile from getting too spread out. You want to keep everything nice and tight in on the pile. You want it to be more of a cube or a sphere than you want it to be like a triangle or a pyramid. All right. So your pile, you want it to be dense. And so having walls helps to have it as little surface area as possible and as much volume as possible within that surface area. Math. Okay. Why are you doing that? Because you want to concentrate and have an area that heats up in the center. Literally, the bacteria start to break down the stuff and heat up the compost pile. And that heat spreads out and increases the bacterial growth, which increases the decomposition. But eventually, it slows down with every week or so. If you're really composting, once the pile is big, you're going to be turning it. So anyway, overall, you need a like 3 foot by 3 foot amount of materials. So think of a pallet by a pallet by a pallet, a cubic yard of materials. Now that's your browns as you mix it in with your greens. Now you hear me saying browns and greens. You're going to be creating layers. Now, here's where we go to somebody else's imagery here. Great. Somebody else made this. This is awesome. So this could be in a compost bin, but if you look here, they're doing shredded paper as a layer, and then some kitchen scraps. And then if look at the measurements here, a big 10 centimeters. So that's a decimeter, whatever. They're doing this much shredded newsprint. On top of that, a smaller layer of kitchen scraps. Those are your greens. And then on top of that, a thicker layer of wood shavings or something like that. And then a thinner layer of grass clippings, your greens, your browns, dry leaves working in there. And then garden clippings, the things that you just clipped from the garden, or your weeds that you pulled out without any weed seeds on them, or dead plants that you're putting in here. Those are your greens. Shredded cardboard. So in this, here's the thing. Could I use shredded newsprint throughout the whole thing in every brown layer, brown layer, brown layer, brown layer? Absolutely. Could I use straw in every single one of those? Absolutely. An illustration like this is just showing you within this illustration all the different things that you could incorporate. And honestly, the more diverse things you work into your compost, the more diverse the nutrients are that you're going to get out of your compost. If I only use straw and only use chicken manure, I'm going to get some beautiful compost, but it won't be as diverse in its nutrients and the bacterial load and the fungal load that it adds to the garden as if I were to mix in kitchen scraps and some other things. So here's the thing, is that you have access to this. If you want to learn more about composting, you're going to dive deep into this, but the rules are so simple. Greens and browns, you want to have more browns than you do have greens. The browns are your dried up carbon rich materials. The greens are your nitrogen rich materials that are generally fresher. Now, when we're thinking of this, we're also going to think of some no-nos, some things that you do not want to add in there. Let's see if this is a decent list. Oh, wow, that's super small. But anyway, glorious greens, neutrals, no. Let's see, but lists like this, they help you have a general idea of the things like, do I have algae? No. But like, do I have clover? No, not really. Do I have coffee grounds? Yes. You're going to go through a list like this. It doesn't make sense for me to list things. It makes sense for you to look through a detailed list like this and to maybe highlight or check off the things that you know you have access to and just start to go, okay, which things do I have or could I get that could be my browns that I'm going to need a lot of? And which are the things that I have on a daily basis or whatever, that I could have. Oh my gosh, urine. Let's not even get into there. So you're gonna find a lot of different things on these, but we're never going to be putting in like, human waste or animal waste. I wouldn't put urine in my compost pile. So we got the layers. We got there was another. I had another graphic organizer for it. Oh, maybe it's here. No, that's not the one I was looking for. But anyway, just to kind of like to go over other things that people forget. Here's the thing, is that if you're gardening, composting with a bin system that has a top on it, like the bin that I'm using to gather my materials in, or a tumbler, that's a closed system that has air holes in it that's going to constantly be pulling out moisture, meaning it's going to start to dry out. You're going to need to keep watering it. Every time you add stuff to it, you water it down really well. And then probably like once a week, you're like watering down the pile really well. Why are you doing that? You're trying to soak it through and through without making a big swampy mess, but you're trying to make sure that it doesn't dry out, because if it's dry, then the bacteria and the fungi that are in there, they're not going to be able to have an environment that they want to break down the materials. However, we don't want pooling water either. That's why if we're thinking of adding things like grass clippings or leaves, which really compact down, or newspaper, we're going to like shred up that newspaper. We're going to shred up that cardboard so that it doesn't compact and make layers that can stop water from penetrating the pile. Okay, that's bad. Or making layers that stop oxygen from flowing in and out. We need it to breathe. So a lot of oxygen is going to be used in this, and that's why I love straw mixed in with the whole system. Yes, I'll use cardboard and some newsprint and stuff like that to mix those in there, but I'm going to be using a lot of straw because those straw crisscrosses and adds a lot of spots for air to get in there and it also holds a lot of moisture as well. Okay, so if we go back to the presentation, where is it? If we go back to the presentation, we just think through, yes, this. Remember that I was saying that, what am I doing? I'm kind of like banking materials. This is like composting. Composting made easy is when you have all of your browns ready to go. And then as the weeks go on and you have kitchen scraps day after day, you dump your kitchen scraps and add a layer of browns on top. You dump your kitchen scraps and add a layer on top. Do you see how like over the course of a few weeks or a month, everything from here will move over here, but now be layered. It'll now be layered. That's why I'm saying bank those browns so that you can compost with them. And then once this is full, you're then going to start the really active process if you want. You can leave that pile in its layers. And that's what I say in the handouts. Let's see. What do I got here? Kill that. Okay. I know we're going a little over on the he's going to talk for 45 minutes or whatever, and then open it up for questions. But we're almost there for questions. As we think through the general process, and when I chose what I was going to copy and put in here from my organic fertility class, I really kept it to the basics of composting. What are the things that you really need to stay true to without confusing you? And so here's the thing, is that once you've got everything, here's why it says optional. You may want to turn the pile. What that's going to do is it's going to accelerate how fast it decomposes. I wonder if I have that here. Yeah, see, I even cut out that acceleration process out of here, because you could leave the compost pile once it's in layers, greens and browns and greens and browns and greens and browns. You could leave that pile for a year or two, then dig into it. Here's what's going to happen. The stuff on the outer layers will not decompose, because that is like the protective layer that's creating a microenvironment on the inside for things to break down over time. But the act of turning it will accelerate the decomposition process. So I generally want to be able to use my compost as soon as possible. And I like to burn through that pile. So what I will do is, once I've got all the layers in that 3 foot by 3 foot pile, I then go on a weekly exercise regimen. Okay. And I have my pitchfork ready, and I have my spade ready. And here's what it looks like, is that I take that pile after it's been sitting for a week, or maybe a week and a half. And here's the thing, is that if you burrow your hand into that pile, you'll start to feel, after a week or two, you'll start to feel that the inside of that is warm. Okay. So what can happen though, is it could get too warm or whatever, but if I want to accelerate this, I want to stir it up and mix oxygen into it. So here's what happens, is that I take that, I don't really have okay, let's imagine that that's the pile. Okay, I don't have a visual for this, but I take this pile of layers that are here, and I take my shovel as I work into it, and I just chop straight down, and I try to cut things up, chop straight down, pull that out onto the ground, chop straight down, pull that out onto the ground. What am I doing when I do that? I'm helping the process by breaking up the straw, breaking up the plant fibers into smaller parts with those chops. But I'm also, as I take a chop from the top down, I'm mixing all of those layers of that compost cake from top to bottom. I just made a little pile that remixes those materials, takes some of the materials from the outside and now puts them in the inside, and some of the, you know what I mean? And so I do that, chop, pull out, chop, pull out, chop, pull out. Now, eventually the pile in the ground gets kind of big. So I take my pitchfork and I shove it and I throw it into one of the empty bins to turn over the pile into the next bin. This is why you'll see a 3-bin model sometimes. 1 bin, my pillow, 1 bin to gather brown materials, 1 bin to start a new pile. And when that pile is ready, you cycle between that bin and the 3rd bin. So moving the material here, chop and put in, chop and put in. And this I do within like a half an hour. Chop should take a little shorter than a half an hour to chop the whole pile up and move it into the other bin. You get how it's like an exercise regimen. You're going to get your heart rate up. Okay. So this is optional, but if you want fast compost, this is what's going to do it. And what I've done is taken that whole pile, stirred it up, chopped it up, and now created a whole new pile from that material in a bin. And I let that sit for another week, week and a half. And then the next week, I do the same process. Chop in, chop in, chop in. And that way, anything that was on the outside so this process you do for about 3 months. Sounds like a long time. It is. Okay. But 3 months is a lot faster than a year to 2 years in a pile that never gets turned. So the slow, easy method is to just pile your materials and layers and just leave it there, but you're never going to get as beautiful compost as this chopping method. So without getting crazy in the compost, you get the basics for how could you start a compost pile? Why would I want 3 bins? You kind of see the reason for 3 bins, 1 to store the materials, 1 to build a pile, and then another one for when you need to turn that pile over, and then you need to turn the pile over, and you need to turn the pile over while you're still gathering materials for when this pile is done composting. And all along, As it composts, the pile will start to shrink because it's just getting denser and denser and losing structure as everything breaks down. When is the compost ready? It is ready when you can put your hand into it and you pull it out and you can't tell what anything was anymore. If I pull it out and I'm like, I still see pieces of corn cob, I'll just leave the whole thing in there. Or maybe I'll harvest some of it, use it in potting, use it as spread it on as fertilizer in the garden, or put it next to some plants, spot fertilizing and stuff like that. But maybe still leave a majority of the pile to keep turning along, And here's the great thing. That compost is filled with bacteria and fungi and stuff where you don't need to buy any stuff like this. Once you've got some compost that's already like alive, you can use that to start the next compost pile and accelerate that process by giving it literally just a couple handfuls of starter compost and sprinkling that in. You'll be seeding it with life. Okay, we're there. So it is question and answer time if you'd like. Feel free to use the chat. Should it be covered? So that's a great question. So the covering is optional. And I would suggest that if you really wanted to preserve the nutrients that were in the pile, once you start the turning process, the chop and the move. Okay, once you start the chop and the move process, that's the time where I might have some sort of little tarp over the top. One, because, I didn't say this, but when I chop and move it, I'm also watering it as I put it into the new thing. Remember, water's a key thing. Extra water is going to just fall out of this and leach away. It's fine. But as I'm turning the pile, 1 week now, and then maybe 2 weeks later, turning the pile, on a leisurely basis, getting a little exercise. When I'm turning it, I'm re-watering it with, really soaking it through with a hose. If we also have the rain pouring down on it, you make a good point. If we're going to make something that's like nutrient dense, rain falling down on it will leach out some of those nutrients. And so here's the thing, is that you can be lazy and you can not have it covered. You're going to still end up with great compost. If you really want to preserve the nutrients that are in the compost, a simple top cover is what you need. Nothing covering the sides, just a simple rain cover to stop it from just getting rained on over and over and over. When you chop and move, do you move directly to the third bin or move it from the ground out of the second into the third bin? Do you move it upside down? So remember, as I'm chopping it, I'm going straight down the pile, which takes top, middle, and bottom and mixes it all together. And I pull that out just because I want to do all the chopping. I want to do a whole bunch of chopping, and then that chopping gets in the way. So at that time, I take the pitchfork and move it into the next bin, whatever bin is empty, move it into that bin, and then I chop, move it into the next bin. Once the pile kind of, you get to a point where you're like, I can't stand. I'm going to be standing all over this stuff because it's right in your way. What would attract a bear? Okay, so that's going to come down to what do you put in it? It's going to attract wildlife if you're putting in things that the wildlife like to eat, and if you're not covering it up. That's why I'm an advocate. Now, when I say covering it up, I mean putting a layer of straw and stuff like that on top, having walls around it. Okay. You're not going to stop bears from doing what bears want to do. So if you have bears in your area, I don't know. I'm not gonna pretend to know to have the answer of what to do with a bear. I know that if I just throw my stuff on the ground, I get the raccoons and the possums. Okay. If I make a little walled bin system, then what happens is it's a deterrent. They have to crawl up and over. And so you saw with those fencing panels that I use, when I put a fencing panel on top, it's just this huge deterrent for them to get in there. And as I'm adding stuff, I'm also adding straw and stuff on top of it. If I were to just throw the stuff in there, that's where I see the wildlife day in and day out, night in and night out. But as I'm covering it with brown materials, I'm reducing the smells and the odors that get out there that would be attracting things. If we kind of get there, A smelly compost pile is a sign that you don't have enough of the brown materials layered in there. So you want nice, healthy layers, thick layers, just like in your garden, how you want like 4-inch layers of straw in your garden. You kind of want these big 4-inch layers or so of these brown materials. They get compacted over time, but they are going to reduce the smells, which then reduces the likelihood of inviting the wildlife in. So, okay, other things. Any other questions? I don't know. I hope you had fun. Soil blocks thing. That's like a, I don't know. It's like a game changer in the like not needing plastic world of like I can't remember the last time I bought pots, and like these plastic trays just last forever. I bought a crate of 50 of them. They end up being $1 a piece, so it's like $50. But I use them year after year after year, and I think it's been 9 years now, and they're still holding up. And if I just think about how much plastic I haven't like put into the landfill just by making my own transplants and buying these metal tools, and again, I've overbought on the tools. I've spent way more than I need to. If I were to buy one and start fresh, I wouldn't bother with any of the hand ones. I'd buy the one $200 stand-up tool to save my back and just make lots of little soil blocks. And then if I felt like I needed some bigger ones, I might buy like a bigger version of this. But somebody who's never done this before, maybe just get one of the small tools and spend $30, $35. Any other questions? Let's see. Oh, we didn't talk about things not to put in the compost bins. You should look. You can find tons of, go to Pinterest, find tons of like graphic organizers and stuff of list of good things and bad things. Some of the things you'd never want to put in your compost system would be stuff from cats and dogs, waste from cats and dogs, and like your kitty litter, dog poop. No, it's gonna have parasites in it. Even if you worm or whatever your dog or your cat, and it's gonna have parasites in it. You don't want to put that in your garden because you're a mammal too. You don't want to put meats in there or cheese. So you don't want to do the dairy thing. Oh, thanks. Thank you very much. You have a great weekend as well. I'm just going to go through some of those things. You're free to leave. Yeah. Yard trimmings with pesticides. So if something was sprayed with something, you don't put those in your compost pile. It's plastic or metal, of course. Yeah, you're not going to put plastic or metal things in a compost pile. The things to avoid are generally things that are fatty and greasy and smelly. So if you think of like onions, smelly. They're also high in fats and stuff like that. Garlic, just avoid. They're really not going to want to break down. Also think of like the outside of an orange. So all citrus fruit is like off the table. Don't bother putting it in a compost pile. It's just not going to break down because of it's so like that waxy layer that's on the outside. It's so resistant to the process of composting. Avocados, oddly enough, even though high in fats and stuff like that, if you think about, you eat most of the good part of the avocado. I've had great success with the peels and the pits. Banana peel, absolutely. Banana peels are great. Yeah, banana peels are great. The no-nos are dairy, meats. When you think compost pile, think like vegan. Think vegan. Okay, that's a pretty easy thing to do. But then also avoid potent things. Citrus is potent, and it like really puts off microbes and other things that are in the pile that want to break it down, like the worms that are in there. Worms are not gonna, if you take my like summer class where we talk about worm composting and stuff like that as well, that's the organic fertility one, also talks about worm bins, which is awesome. But worms won't touch those potent things like onions and garlic, the onion family of things. Even if it's just an onion peel, they're not going to touch it. They're not going to touch any of the citrus fruits as well. So since worms are a big part of the compost pile, you don't want to offend them. Yeah. Ashes, actually putting ashes from like your wood stove in, it's like, it tends to be a questionable thing. It depends on what you were burning. If you know that what you were burning was like just wood, safe wood and stuff, like, then that's safe to use in your compost pile in small amounts, the ashes, literally that potash. But like the if you happen to be burning any wood that's treated at all, like a plywood or like pressure treated wood or anything like that, which I hope that you're not burning anyway. That goes in the trash. You don't burn it because you don't want to breathe in the fumes. But typically stuff from like, your stove that you're burning in your house, your wood stove, that'd be fine to put those ashes in and mix those in small amounts. But if you're like got like a weekend fire or something like that, and you're kind of burning any old thing, and yeah, let's see. If we want to attract worms, should our compost not have a bottom? Yeah, typically compost bins don't have a bottom. Yeah, yeah. That big black bin that I showed you, it doesn't have a bottom. Funny thing enough, though, even in the round tumbler that was on the ground, the worms found their way in, and in my stand-up tumbler that was on a stand, the worms were in there because I put compost in there to begin with, and the compost had worms in there, and so the worm population kicked up in that bin, even though it was off the ground. That's a good question. Yeah. Things that can be composted: hair and fur. I've never put my own hair or fur in there, but I have put, like, when I groom my rabbit, put that in the compost bin. Fun times. All right. Yeah. You guys either fell asleep or there's a good chunk of you who are still here. But thanks for the thanks. Thank you for the thanks. So you're awake. Good. That's good. Everybody have a nice weekend. We'll say goodbye. Bye, bye, bye. You're welcome. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Let's see. Yep. All right. I'll kill it now. Bye. See you next week. Last class next week.